My name is Britta, and I work at the Public Library of Brookline's Coolidge Corner Library. Thank you for joining us for the library's Spring Genealogy series. This workshop, Personal Digital Archiving, is the last of 3, and recordings of the first 2 are available on the library's YouTube channel. I'm happy to introduce today's speaker, the library's own Jessica Statler. Jessica is an archivist turned reference librarian. She joined the library in late 2019 after a long tenure at the Congregational Library and Archives in Boston. In both professional and personal spheres, she appreciates finding new paths for old patterns, sharing resources and enthusiasms. When not at work, she makes art, collects useful boxes to be repurposed, and longs for the return of roller rink popularity. So thanks for being here, Jess. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Britta. And hello, everybody. I hope everyone's having a good day. While I was muted, I noticed that a siren went by, so we might get serenaded by the local fire and safety people as we continue on. So just so you know. I am Jessica Statler. I am really excited to give my first presentation. And Britta, one thing before I get rolling, it looks like it's still on your screen. So do you want to make sure that it's?
Yeah, I can.
Tra-la, tra-la. Yep. Hey, oh my God, okay. It's me. Thank goodness I don't have to look at myself the whole time. Thanks, Britta. Okay, I am going to go into share screen mode. 1 moment, please. Okay, share screen. That is the one, share and present. Okay, good, we good? Happy? Good, okay. Can you see it, Britta? Okay. So this workshop, Personal Digital Archiving, is it's going to be, I hope basic. I'm looking forward to questions, so definitely put those in the chat when they come up. We're going to do some, what I hope is basic. You don't need to be a technical wizard to apply a lot of this material. I know that when I am dealing with a whole lot of technical things, or even not technical things, my decision paralysis is such that I don't even want to get started. So my hope for this workshop is to get past folks that initial discomfort of how do I even do this thing? And so that's the thing that we're doing. And the fact that you've even showed up for this is a great sign. That means that you've already taken the first step on doing a good job on taking care of your own digital archive because you want to take care of it. What else? If you have questions, you can always contact the library later. And I did want to give you a little heads up that this presentation is not going to cover how to scan things. Like I have a whole bunch of photographs. How do I do a good job scanning? That would be an entire hour and then some just to cover that topic. So we're just going to be talking about things that were born as a digital object, like emails or photographs, videos, social media, that sort of thing. So it's just that. Okay, just making sure. So I'm sure that if there are questions about that, if we have time, we can get into that. But there's people who spend their entire career just on that topic. So let's just make sure that you can find the stuff you want to do. So let's get started. Step 1, like first, find your stuff. What do you have? Lots of us have different kinds of devices. You might have your majority of your material on a desktop or a laptop. You may find that a lot of things that you want to save live on your phone or maybe on Facebook or something like that. And one of the most important things that you can do when you're thinking about like what are things that I want to keep is first, where are they? So when I'm thinking about saving things, I almost wish I'd put in one earlier slide about like what is important, because I actually do want to stop for a moment to say like, well, what is important when you're talking about your digital archive? Usually when I think about things like that, I think about things that describe my life and help tell the story of who I am and what I like and what I want to do. So photographs are really, really important to me. I am an artist, and so I really think in a visual way. And I'm also a historian archivist, so I think about like the visual representation of my life. So you might find that is also true for you. You might be a writer, and so you might want to think about your writings in whatever form you might have on a computer, or a blogger or a vlogger, depending on how much you like to interact with the internet. And certainly the materials that you have created while doing genealogical research, spreadsheets maybe, or Word documents, all sorts of things. I'd love to hear more about what sorts of documents you might have that you want to make sure you stay safe. But hopefully, no matter what sort of document you have, these will be the steps that you take in order to make sure that material that you have been looking at today will still be there next year and in 5 years. And if you want to pass that on to family members or friends in 20 years or 25 years, if it's still relevant to your life, like photographs or stories, we want to make sure that they're still there, because unlike a thing that's a piece of paper, a digital object doesn't have the same kind of strength and permanence, where you can't just like pick it up and look at the piece of paper and say, oh yes, this is the presentation from 2021 when Jessica Statler talked about genealogical things from the Public Library of Brookline. Sometimes if it's just like Doc 105, I'll get into more of that later. So anyway, now that I've kind of done step 0, we can talk about step 1 a little bit more of like, find your stuff. Is it on your phone? Is it on your computer, your tablet, somewhere, a platform, social media? First, you need to know where they are. And then once you do, you can try to consolidate them, download materials if you want to. For example, not everybody wants to do this. A lot of people talk about, like, I have a story of, I had a boss once who was a very dear, sweet historian, and he took every single email that he got from work and printed them out and handed it to me, the archivist. And that was a lot. That was maybe more than what we needed in any 1 year. But like that's not really a practical way to do things these days. Back in 2001, when this was going on, you know, like it almost seemed like it had some viability. But these days, maybe we just want to make sure that all of the contents in Gmail or AOL or Facebook or Instagram can be just downloaded in a big chunk. And the best way to do that is to check the help guides on the platform that you want to download from, because they are the experts in their own stuff, and they're going to have the most up-to-date examples of how to do this thing. You might want to go to the internet also, just to Google or whatever your favorite search platform is, to also see if you can find something that you really like, get more into how to do that. But the one problem that I want to give you sort of like a little heads up on downloading is that if the article or page is kind of older, it might not have the most up-to-date information, and then you'll spend too much time being frustrated and like trying to do a thing that doesn't work that way anymore. And sometimes the content creator can be trying to maybe sell you stuff rather than being actually interested in giving you an answer. So those are always some good tips to think about if you want to download your stuff. It's a technical term. Okay, so let's say you've gathered all of your archival interesting stuff that you want to keep, your photographs from your phone and your so forth and so on. The next thing you want to think about if you want to keep your things is, does it have a name that you can recognize later? And is it going to be in a location on a computer that you can find? I have on this screen a symbol, an example of what some desktops might look like. This is a stunt desktop in which we see a whole bunch of stuff of who knows what, different materials, different types of files, and you probably won't be able to find what you're looking for if this is a representation of your computer. So trying to emulate a tidier, more vertical file sort of situation is what we're trying to recreate computer-wise. So that means make use of creating folders, and I've put in a little example on the screen here of, just create a folder to put like things in. And sometimes if you've got a whole bunch of the same thing, but you might not necessarily remember, you're not going to remember later why all of the details of that particular project, I like to use the notes field, and I've used the shortcut symbol for notes, which is just a simple document file, the most basic just text document that you can have. And I use that, and a lot of information professionals do use these, and they're called README files, and you can just use that to write down any important information regarding the contents of that folder. I'm just trying to think of an example, and of course it falls right out of my head. But that is a way to go. Do I have any notes here that I wrote down that were clever of me? Maybe I did. Does that? Okay, so name the file, create a structure that your files can live in, and then give yourself signposts and try to be consistent. So the next thing I'm going to do is to give you an example of what is a good file name. Oh, nope, first I'm going to talk about copies. My best example of this was when I was cleaning up my folders lately at home, and I came across a 2008 file of just gardening stuff. And I have like little thumbnails of all of the different pictures that I took. And from a distance, they all kind of look the same. And I suspect that is frequently true as we do work on our computers and devices, that a lot of the material that we have is a copy or really close to the same thing. And what I would recommend before you do a whole, as you're going through all of your files, as you're going, decide how much of this stuff you want to keep, because inevitably you might not need to keep 12 pictures of the same arugula. I mean, maybe not 10 years after the fact, or 20 or 15 years after the fact. So this is all very variable, but I generally find that this is a good space, in between gathering things up and giving things good names, is maybe get rid of the blurry picture or the picture of the people's back of the head that doesn't actually look like anything at all. Okay. Naming your files. So when you are naming your files, this is what I do as an archivist, is thinking about finding this thing later. And when I do that, and I like to just show you, like, here's a screenshot of our last slide, and it's kind of funny that like you can read this right here, but if this were a computer file, you wouldn't be able to read it. So trying to give yourself breadcrumbs as to what this might mean. The way that I do this is I give it its date, like when did this happen? I like to use this example of like the Jefferson wedding where Chris and Pat get married, you know, back in 1992. You remember, it was nice. It was in the garden. And so you write down the date, which also is great because then you can always remember, oh, right, it was on November 11th. Oh, isn't that nice? And making sure that you have that full description in the file name helps, you know, anchor your content in a particular time. And if you use that all the time, then you'll always know to look, oh, well, that's the file from 2002, not 2012, or whatever it happens to be. And then using a short description of what the item is that that is in this file, Jefferson wedding, like Smith genealogy versus Jones genealogy, etc. That's the sort of thing that you want to have, just a short little note as to what that thing might be. And here I did 04 to indicate the fourth picture of a set that's less than 99. If I knew that there was going to be more than 99 things, I would have put 004. We want to avoid breaks in the naming structure, like instead of Jefferson space wedding space date. Those sorts of things might very well break within the technical computer sides of things. So whenever possible, use underscores or dashes to make the name of your documents stronger. Okay, I just realized I don't have a clock unless I take out my phone and look. I see we're at 3:23. Okay. Okay, so I think that somewhat covers that. So if you have named your files well and they're in a folder, hopefully you'll be able to find them later. And now I'm going to show you an example from my own hard drive of how I did this. So for example, on the right side, I have folders of photographs, and they're all I just decided that the closest I was going to get was just put things into a year folder. And if one were to look into those, they would not be well described at all, but at least I know they are in the folder that is from that year, and that is enough context for me. And hopefully that will be good enough, or perhaps I will find a whole lot of free time in which I rename everything. Back in the day, in 2011, I had moved into a house on a street called Swan. And so on the left side, you'll see Swan and then a date. I didn't even follow my own instructions of using a 4-digit year, because what if that was, I don't know, 1911? I guess I just trusted that it was going to be 2011 fine. So that gave me an idea of, I know that Swan means a place I used to live. It has a date and then the number of pictures in that particular set. And you can see next to the example of all of the name files when it was modified, and you can see that it is the same date. So once you change something like that, like a file will change date modification, but at least here it gives you a good example of the naming structure and the information you want to keep. So hopefully, if you have a whole lot of documents that you want to keep track of, you'll be able to follow an approximate notion of that so that you can find things later. Next. Okay, so that was step 2, like gather everything, make sure you know how to name it. And step 3 is an important part of the technical world, is to back it up so it will be there later. There's lots of different ways you can do this. You can use an external hard drive. For smaller projects, you could use maybe a CD or DVD or a thumb drive. But I don't know about you, but my computer at home no longer has a built-in DVD drive in it. So that is the way of the future. And you can get external drives to run CDs, but keep in mind, sometimes that really cool thing from that CD from however many years ago, you might not be able to use it later. So I will talk about more of that later. The other thing is that digital material, digital hardware doesn't last that long. You might have discovered this to be true, like when your phone no longer is great after 5 years. This is also true for CDs, hard drives, and thumb drives, that they're going to probably wear out. So don't expect them to last forever just because they were lightly used. Sometimes they just get, they're just fragile. So plan on replacing those. Another way that you can back things up is to use a cloud service, which you might be using already. And that's another way to save things. It really depends on your comfort level and how much you want to be involved in backing things up. And the reason why we back things up is because, as I said, your hardware and your software is fragile. You might find that you had a flood, and if you have a backup of your material, then you know that you don't have to worry about the device that your object was on. So backups are important. And this is an example of the different icons that I was looking for when it came to cloud storage, because I want to talk a little bit more about what cloud storage means. The thing that I realized when doing the research for this is that all clouds are blue, apparently, at least on the internet. At least when you look at these images, it seems like all representations of the digital cloud will be blue. That's not true. The cloud is basically somebody else's computer. And there's a lot of people who have created their profession as their job is to take care of other people's materials. Like, I guess sort of in a clearinghouse, a warehouse of other people's things, or maybe one of those cube storages, but living on computers. So, but they're all just basically somebody else's computer. But because we have so much ease in technology, it's possible to just have your entire everything backed up with a service. I'm trying to think of like there's just so many different ones. I don't want to get distracted. Man, this is where I really, really miss being able to have live programming, because this is where we would have like a little bit more back and forth. So definitely hoping that we will be having some questions later. But there are a lot of choices when it comes to cloud backup. And I'm just going to read my notes here for a second. At the end of this presentation, I will have a link to 2 articles that will help you compare services, because there are easily like dozens of different services that help you back things up. And they all have slightly different takes on how they work, and maybe some of them are older and fancier, and some are newer and maybe hadn't made it into the grand scheme of things yet. What I keep in mind when I think about cloud backup is, what do I want this service to do? Do I just want basically a copy of my computer saved somewhere else? Or do I need to share documents with somebody or do collaborations as like we do at the library all the time and use like Google Docs for that? Do you then need to have that kind of functionality when you are at home? And so when you look at those resources at the end of this presentation, they will give you an idea of what sort are the most competitive and up-to-date types of companies that can do this best for you. Like my own personal example is Carbonite, but Carbonite is, as it turns out, not the powerhouse it was 10 years ago when I started using them, and I've just been using them ever since. There are just so many choices that I don't want to get into the weeds of this is the best one, because it really depends on what you want to do with your stuff. So, but that's one of the ways that we think about saving things in archive land is by using the 3-2-1 rule. And when you have a chance to look at the resources that I have included at the end, you will see this referenced in a lot of other places, like the National Archives site and the Purdue site that are quite helpful in how to do all of these things on your own. What the 3-2-1 rule is that it means that you will have 3 copies of your item to be saved, and you want to have them in 2 locations. For example, perhaps the device that you are using right here and now to participate in this workshop, and then maybe a hard drive that you keep as well. And ideally, one of those locations will be off-site, so that if anything significant happens while to the first site, if there's a flood or a fire, or even just a major electrical surge and one of the devices gets fried, then the files that you are saving, if they're not in the same place, will then be able to be brought back and used as your backup. So that's how we in the industry think about best practices. And quite frankly, sometimes if it's just part of that, that's better than zero protection at all. So if you have one off-site, or like in the cloud, for example, the cloud counts as off-site, you can rest assured that it's okay, I hope. So anyway, 3-2-1 will help make sure that the materials that you care about will still be there, even if there is a technical disaster or a literal disaster. When thinking about computers and technical things that are born as a digital object, like a Word document, for example, you may find that that those are in a proprietary file type And then there are some types of files that are not proprietary, that they're open source, that means that you can open them no matter what kind of software that you have. For example, if you were very excited about the latest genealogical software that helps you build trees or create like things from spreadsheets and into trees, or I wish that I could have had like a little thing here so we could say, oh yes, that. But sometimes those sorts of softwares are, you need to pay money for them. And so therefore the finished product will require you to use that software to open that device, that item. You'll find that true in, say, example, Photoshop. So just think about, will you be able to open this document no matter what? Some file types are easier to open than others, and some file types are just more stable. When thinking about photographs, for example, the TIFF type file is a huge file, but also doesn't lose data as it goes, because there are other files like JPEGs, which are very, very common, but they also lose data every time they get opened and closed. So that can be a problem. You might also want to be thoughtful about, like, one of the danger points is when you're migrating from one device to another. I've certainly lost phone numbers from one phone to another phone because the SIM card didn't take or whatever. So always give that particular process when you're getting a new device, whatever it happens to be, a computer or a phone or a tablet, and make sure that all of the information transfers over that you think is important. And I included this great picture from 1994 to kind of illustrate how quickly things change in the world of technology. The things that seem like such an amazing, awesome thing may not still be available in 10 years. I like to think about, like, my cassette tapes that I had in school were replaced by CDs. And those CDs have slowly been replaced by just a file on my computer, an MP3 or a WAV file. And I don't buy CDs anymore, only if I'm feeling very, like, paranoid about will the music platform still be there in 10 years. So the ones that I really, really care about, sometimes I'll buy the CD anyway and put it on my computer. So just think about, when thinking about that, my hope for you is that you don't get too attached to the type of device or software, because it's going to change. That's just how technology is. So don't get too attached to the thing that gives you your content, as long as the content itself is still there. So it just transforms. So that's kind of I'm going to just walk us back one more time on, like, if you want your own personal materials that you have created in your lifetime and live on a computer or a device of some sort, and you want those things to still be here in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, hopefully these steps will have helped you start down the path of being able to ensure that those items, those photographs, the letters, emails, spreadsheets, whatever they happen to be, your genealogical activities, these steps will hopefully get you to a place where you can make sure that those items are still there in that time frame. So the first thing is to make sure you know where all of your special materials are. Are they on your phone? Are they on your computer? Are they on your tablet? And then make sure that they are labeled in a way that you can find them again, because the file names that are usually generated by a machine is not going to have the same nuance that you give it. So if it's wedding photographs or it's research for your next book or whatever it happens to be, make sure that you leave yourself breadcrumbs as to the contents of what is in your digital file. And then once you know that you can, when you look at that file on your screen and say, oh yes, that's that file, make sure that if you have a digital disaster, that you have a backup of it by using the 3-2-1 rule of 3 copies on 2 different places, and one of those places is not in the same location. And so hopefully with those things, you'll be able to share your treasures with your friends and family in the future. And here is the list of resources. As promised, these will be in an email, so you can just click through and follow the Purdue University Personal Digital Archiving Guide. And let me take a minute to talk about the Northeast Document Conservation Center. They're also known as NEDCC, and they are basically the place to go if you need anything, want to think about conservation, preservation, and they have so many amazing resources on how to take care of your stuff. Like what's a good box? How do you just all sorts of things, both digital and physical. The Library of Congress, the National Archives, they're both amazing resources. I use them all the time when I'm thinking about, am I doing this the right way? They provide a lot of free materials on how to do all of this and more. So if you didn't remember all of the things, which nobody could, because I don't even remember all of the things all the time, these will be resources that will remind you about how you're supposed to do whichever bit you want to do. I've also included, I totally spaced on talking about a tool called a renamer, a file renamer. So if you have a whole lot of documents or photographs and you want to change the names super fast and efficiently and consistently, there are tools out there called file renamers that you can use. And so I've included a link on choosing a file renamer. And then finally, 2 options for cloud storage, so that if you need to think about what works best for you, you can look at these 2 very, very official different articles from very reputable sources and think about which one might work best for you. So I think, Britta, that is the end of now we can move on to the questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here in a second. If I can make it stop share. There, stop share.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jessica. Lots of good information there. And we are open for Q&A now. We didn't have any come in during the presentation, but if you'd like to put your questions into chat now or unmute yourself to ask directly, we'd be happy to take them. And while you ponder those, I will start us off with a question of my own, which is, at the risk of being a little bit morbid, you talked a lot about the future. And the future sometimes, well, always involves not being around anymore. So are there specific best practices for making sure that, say, a file name that has meaning for you also has meaning for people after you are no longer around to interpret it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Britta. Thank you. And well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, I think it really depends on the type of file that it is. That's why part of why I like using the just a little text file to provide further explanation if it's needed. So I mean, there's really no one true path. Everything is a lot harder to do digitally in some ways because you can't just scribble a note on the original piece of paper explaining this is what this is. So that's why I like to use text notes to explain why things are the way they are.
Okay, here's a question about iPhone pictures. They have two formats now, and can you comment on the JPEG format versus the new one, which the questioner can't remember the name of, but maybe you know.
Wow. Okay, so as it turns out, I don't happen to know. That's how fast things change. JPEGs are a very stable sort of file. That's what I use that all the time. That's what my phone generates when I do photographs. And that is a totally valid, good, solid choice. So if it's between new thing, which if it's an iPhone, it might be proprietary, you never know, versus a JPEG, well, I would go with a JPEG, at least until I understand a little bit more about this new file that even I, a reference librarian, does not know about with an iPhone. So no, I wish I knew more. I'll have to look that up for you.
Yeah, the follow-up comment is that the new format may take up less space. So maybe that's why Apple has introduced it.
Oh, the new one takes up less space. Okay, well, that's good. I wonder though, I mean, yeah, that's great for a certain degree, but I kind of wonder, my follow-up to the greater world is, if it takes up less space, does that mean that it's less, like it doesn't recreate, like if you wanted to print it out and have it in an album or similar, would it look as good as a JPEG? It's like, I don't know. So that's a curiosity. Yeah, but if you're just wanting to do a whole lot of fast, quick, not keep forever, maybe this new file format will mean you can keep a whole lot more pictures on your phone. So that's exciting.
Okay, here's another question. Does material in the cloud become compatible with new operating systems or software?
Does the material in the cloud become compatible with new operating systems or software? I admit I don't know. I'm trying to translate what that means. Monique, do you want to tell me more about what you're asking?
I'll unmute. Okay. Basically, as operating systems change, or even as software is upgraded, sometimes you can no longer use the materials you've saved. Is that going to be true in the cloud as well? That because you've created the stuff with a certain operating system or software. So does the cloud have a way of dealing with that, or are you just as lost as you were before?
That is a very good question, and I don't know, actually, if I haven't run across that particular issue. I'm just going to start writing things down now. I appreciate the opportunity to learn new things when people ask questions.
Okay, and then since I've got you, and since I am a retired librarian,
Yay.
one of the things that I've seen coming from archivists is saying that because our storage materials die so fast, it's ideal now to put things back on microfilm or microfiche because those last 75 years. So a recopy every 75 years is a lot easier than every 3 to 5. What's your take, and how would one go about that, or would you have to use a service?
You would absolutely have to use a service, and the number of services that offer microfilm from when I started in the profession over 20 years ago versus now, I mean, like they've died off. So many have just died off, so it's harder to come by, and maybe those will make a comeback like vinyl records have, but maybe not. So I do understand and agree about the importance of, I guess it really depends on, like, if I, as the archivist for this institution, was concerned about the permanence, I would consider microfilm. We still do microfilm newspapers, or at least we did until very lately. And then we will scan those. But for personal use, I have not seen anybody successfully navigate microfilm. But I certainly, if it's that important, then yes, get it on microfilm. Like if you have a manuscript that you don't think, well, honestly, like just paper, if it comes down to it, I would just print it out.
Yeah. Now, now that we do film on digital, pictures on digital camera. Now, what is the lifespan of the old-fashioned film that we used to use?
Yeah, decades and decades. For the most part, the film that was most frequently and most recently used, that if it's kept in a cool, dark environment, will last for decades without any harm whatsoever. They stopped making the reactive variety long time ago. So,
well, yeah, I mean, it's crazy because you can barely no one out there anymore develops film. I've had to switch to a digital camera because of that.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We have a follow-up from someone about Monique's first question about cloud, saying JPEG file sent to the cloud will come back as a JPEG. That's my impression too. To use your previous metaphor, Jess, of a warehouse. You know, if you send your stuffed teddy bear to the warehouse, it's not going to come back as a stuffed dog. The question is if the system you are downloading the file to can open, for instance, the JPEG or that file type. And if there are file converters embedded in a cloud service, this person says it would probably depend on the service. I've never heard of such a thing, but it's quite possible that it's out there. So thank you for that. And then another question about hardware. I keep buying external drive backups and they don't seem to last even 1 year when they suddenly stop backing things up. So I need to know when they'll stop working. How can I be sure I'm buying something that will last longer? I would like to use cloud storage, but really don't know how to begin.
Good. Yes, totally understand. I've certainly had external drives die precipitously on me as well. So I think one of the things that might be a good choice for making sure that you're choosing an external drive that you think is going to last a little bit longer is to go to one of the compare and contrast articles similar to what I've posted in resources for us here that will help you decide which ones make the best one, because I mentioned in the very beginning about decision paralysis, and sometimes I find that going through the whole process of that is rather overwhelming. And so my first step is to find the reputable source, like, for example, PC Magazine. They're well known, and it's their job to provide accurate data. And so asking a resource like that where to buy, like which type of external drive to buy, that's what I would do, is to spend some time doing that. If you have questions like, how do I figure out what hard drive to buy, your reference librarians will help navigate that for you at the library, because that's an interesting question that we would be able to tackle. So you don't necessarily have to know right now, you just need to know who to ask. So sometimes PC Magazine, sometimes your local librarian, you never know. And then once you do have one that you feel might be a little bit more stable, my own personal solution for remembering to replace those is to write myself a note, maybe in my phone or a calendar reminder to say, hey, today is the day that you need to replace this device. And that's I just leave myself breadcrumbs to remember. Did I remember all of the questions? Oh, and then backup storage, like cloud storage. It is a little bit overwhelming. What I would do if I was starting today is to think about all of the different things that you want to do with your backup. Do you just want to, like, if your hard drive crashes, do you want to just be able to hit a button and get it all back? Or if it's more complex and wanting to do more dynamic sharing, then you might need to look a little bit harder at various resources. But most cloud storage will be able to do that particular feature no matter what, or at least that should be the baseline, at least from my own personal perspective.
Hi, it's Jody, the physical therapist. How are you?
Okay, how you doing?
Okay. Apologies. Another piece of advice from a participant, that solid state hard drives, known as SSDs, tend to last longer and be more reliable than disk hard drives, but those are more expensive. And then also to make sure your hard drive is formatted correctly before you start to use it. Do you want to comment on either of those, Jessica?
Strong agree. Yes, those are both very good points. Thank you very much for sharing that. And that is in fact a great way to make sure that you have a more long-lasting external drive.
Okay. Any other questions before we close today?
Okay, I'm going back through the chat myself, and I got clarification further, and maybe we said this and I just lost it in the back and forth, but HEIC is a new format. It isn't everywhere. Example, if trying to upload pictures to CVS for printing, tech will catch up, but it's Apple heavy now. So thank you for that clarification. Okay. And if anybody has any, I'm going to switch back to share mode so you can see the end screen. if we don't have any further questions, share screen. Share. Okay, there. This is my email. If you have any questions later, feel free to email me directly. I've also included a link to our local history page and on our website, so that will give you like if you just want to remember how to find our own awesome resources, that is where you need to go. But I am more than happy to answer questions after the fact if nobody has any further questions today.
All right, I just want to thank everyone again for joining us, and we hope to see you in future genealogy programs. Have a good day.